Hello there and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm Joe Rimet, joined today by Ian Doyle Sport. How are we, Ian Doyle Sport?
We're okay, back in my box room. It's like we're back in lockdown again.
Yeah, we are on StreamYard. Paul Gorst is here as well. How are we, Paul?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just wondering whether it's your internet or mine that's slugging along, having a few issues there. But yeah, I suppose this is a bit strange, isn't it, being back on StreamYard as opposed to being sitting around the office? But yeah, we go again.
Well, I can hear you loud and clear. I thought it was just you struggling with the mute button. But yeah, we are back on StreamYard because our producer Ian is away. So I've had a couple.
Has he got more holidays than the rest of us put together? He always seems to be off.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. We had a couple of people get in touch this week saying, is the pod going to be back on YouTube? And with no one to record us in person, we thought we'd get on StreamYard and make sure that we're on YouTube for you. So I'm watching along on YouTube. So if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat. We'll try and get them throughout. And yeah, give us a like, subscribe, press the bell. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, give us some stars. As we always say, give us 5. Give us 4 if you're really picky, but if you want to give us 3 or below, watch a different podcast because that's just mean, isn't it? Just don't like mean behaviour. So before we get going, some people who aren't mean on NordVPN, they're very nice to us and they help this podcast happen. So a big thank you to them for sponsoring us this season and to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan. Go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link gives you 4 months extra free on a 2-year plan. And there's no risk at all with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link's in the podcast episode description box. Anyone who listens to the last pod will know that I was saying that I use Nord all summer because I've been in France for a bit. And it's been great to make sure I don't miss out on several series that myself and my wife have been watching and watch some of the footy as well. So it's a great little tool to have. So thank you, Nord. We'll crack on. Gents, you've both been at Arne Slot's press conference up at the AXA Training Centre in Kirby this morning. Gorsty, it was a little bit Klopp-like, wasn't it, with some of the little swear words he just dropped in there, a little bit of needle with James Pearce as well. So obviously gave him a bit of a briefing, didn't he?
Yeah, the interaction with James was funny, wasn't it? I think James asked about Gomez, almost, what's the situation as you understand it? Is he staying essentially? And I think it was a little bit of an old manager's trick, wasn't it, where he sort of turned a bit of humour on the situation to essentially deflect from the issue of Joe Gomez exploring his options and looking for another club, seeing if another club might be out there before the transfer deadline. Liverpool are insistent that Gomez is training well and is in contention for the squad on Sunday and all that sort of stuff. And I suppose he is. We've just seen him training there at the AXA Training Centre. But the proof will be in the pudding, won't it? If he's not on the team sheet on Sunday, then that to me suggests a second bigger red flag that his days might be numbered. But when James asked him about it, Slot almost just said, "You've been around football a long time. I can tell, basically because you look very old." Now James is 46? Is he in November? Is it November or December? I can never remember his birth date.
Yeah, it's December, isn't it? December.
Is it early December? There's not much in it either way with Slot and James. They're about the same age. So I thought that was maybe a little bit harsh from Arne, but no doubt the lads on Twitter have had the fun with that one because they don't mind sticking the boot into James now and again, do they? So James laughed it off as he tends to do. But yeah, it was just a little bit of an old manager's trick. I thought that one. I wouldn't have liked it if he'd have said it to me, like.
Yeah, but you look great. You're in great shape, young, aren't you? Whereas someone has asked, Oren Thompson has asked on YouTube, does James Pearce look older than Ian? Which is
it depends. If you from far away, I'd say no, but if you get up close, he's got quite a weathered face.
He's not older than you. Nobody looks older than you.
Yeah, they do. Tony looks older than me. Tony Barrett, press officer.
I don't know about that, Ian.
He is older than me. So
James's rockstar lifestyle has taken its toll.
It has. He can only, he's been burning the candle at both ends for way too long, James, and it's all catching up with him now.
Yeah, well, I
Can
don't.
we stop talking about him? Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, I don't think people tuned in to hear us analyse James's age. But yeah, what did you make of it, Ian? I feel like every time I see Slot, I feel like he gains more confidence, isn't the right word, but he certainly looks more familiar with his surroundings, more comfortable, and I like his attitude. I think he comes across well.
Well, he's Dutch, isn't he? And if you want to go down the stereotypical route, then they don't exactly lack confidence to historically Dutch people, shall we say? Certainly not in football, and certainly not the ones that come over and play in England. So, judging from that, he's kind of, he's sticking to the, as I say, the stereotype. But yeah, he does look. Well, he's been there. What is it now? June, July, August. So he's been in the club. Well, officially in position for 2.5 months now. I mean, it's been about, was it 6 weeks, 7 weeks since he's been working at the AXA. So that's quite a decent amount of time. He's seen the players, he's seen them all, knows who he's working with. He's obviously comfortable enough to go to, Bobby Clark, Sepp Vandenberg, Fabio Carvalho, and say, not only do we not need you now, we don't need you ever again. And so they've sold him. So he's been quite happy to, go along with those. Yeah, talking with the press, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that's how we see him. Obviously, everybody else sees him from the point of view of being the Liverpool manager on the touchline and what you see on television and read in the on the websites or in newspapers. Anybody who still does that. But yeah, for us, it's those little interactions, such as he swore, didn't he? He just dropped it in there, an answer about Ryan Gravenberch. Nothing, untoward as it were, but it just shows that he's settling in enough for him to drop a little 4-letter word in there. And I do think perhaps if that went out live, which it would have done, but if it had gone live on somewhere like Sky Sports, they'd have probably said to him, "Come on, don't try not to do that unless you're going off the record because everything's going out live." That's just the way things are. So, no, he's obviously comfortable in what he's doing, what he's saying. As I say before, what the most important thing is that he's comfortable making the decisions, and the decisions to allow for those 3 players to leave, the decision to not play Gomez, not even take him down to Ipswich last week. And of course, the decision to take off Quanta at half time at Ipswich. He's not afraid to do these things already. I don't even think it's a matter of, some people might say, oh, he's stamping down his authority very early on. I just think he did it because he thought that's what needed to be done. And that's all you can ask for from a head coach, because he'll hopefully, well, not hopefully things will go wrong, but hopefully, things will go wrong at some point. And if he can own them as well when things go wrong, his decisions then you've got the making of somebody who can, deal with things in that manner. And that's not always the case, is it? There's a certainly for a manager, you need a certain level of arrogance, but you don't want it to the point where it means you keep on making the same mistakes over and over again, because we've seen that with other managers in the past, that they don't really get anywhere, or they get to a certain level and then after that they tend to be moved on. So, for example, that didn't happen with Jurgen Klopp, and it remains to be seen what happens with Arne Slot. But in terms of him just started and, as you say, getting his feet under the table, it looks as though he's doing that.
Of course, yeah. I thought he's answered the transfer questions well, hasn't he? I mean, we've got a week to go now until the window closes. All the talk externally about Liverpool is about the business that they haven't done, albeit they have done some good business in terms of outgoings that we'll come on to in a bit. But every time he's asked about it, I feel like, again, he handles that well. He seems sure of himself. It doesn't necessarily feel like he's sort of telling the media one thing and perhaps saying something else behind closed doors. He just seems, I kind of believe him when he says, well, I've got a good squad, and if Liverpool end up the window with no extra additions, then I can work with what I've got. Do you get that vibe from him?
Yeah, I think so. It's very different to the way sort of Rafa Benitez might have handled it, who was never shy of making it known in the media that he needed more players, and was always sort of on the lookout for more players. Slot seems very much more from the Klopp school of thought, whereby transfers almost becomes a bit of a dirty word, and you're not allowed to sort of discuss them. And he got asked about Mahmoud-Ashvili, didn't he, was it Peter Stevenson from Sky Sports, and he just sort of said, you know by now that when we've got something to tell you, we will, and sort of just glossed over it very quickly. And yeah, he doesn't seem like someone who's going to go about sort of making cryptic remarks through us or anything like that. And I think that, sort of alignment is good for the club. Certainly front facing, that you're not making it known that there's any sort of questionable decisions behind the scenes that you don't agree with, particularly this early into your tenure when you haven't really got the standing with the supporters in the way the Klopp would have been able to have really gone on the front foot if he felt that certain things were needed that weren't happening. But I do sort of think, I believe what he says when he says that the squad is good enough, and if nothing happens, then he's happy with that. But also, he did say in Pittsburgh and a couple of times after it that Liverpool are looking, and he would be surprised if nothing is done. We've got a week left now of the transfer window, and the closer it gets to the deadline, the more it looks like Liverpool have just panicked if they get closer to the deadline. They're all optics, of course, but there's almost a bit of a sweet spot of when you do your business for it to look like these are the players you wanted from day one and you're happy with what you've done. And they are getting closer towards that sort of grey area where it becomes even scope for criticism when they do some business. So I guess they can't really win, but I still think they need to do something before next week. It's a good squad, but it's not a squad that can't be improved, because look at Man City there. They've just re-signed Ilkay Gundogan, haven't they? And they're looking to get a replacement in for Julian Alvarez and looking to go again. Real Madrid have just won the Champions League and La Liga and have just brought in Kylian Mbappe. So no matter who you are, your squad can be improved, and Liverpool are no exception, despite how often we're told that it's a really good squad, which I agree with, but players can come in and make it better.
Ian, we've seen before. I remember, I think it was deadline day in January 2022, waking up early in the morning, seeing several tweets saying Liverpool were interested in Luis Diaz, and I think within that day, going into work, and within that day, we were reporting on that deal being done. Cody Gakpo was probably quite similar, wasn't he? The Christmas before last. The Christmas before last. So these
Boxing Day it was, at Aston Villa, when they come out,
Things can happen quickly, can't they? I think that what I'm trying to make, the point I'm trying to make, is that the 7 days to go, it's not a long time, but at the same time for Liverpool, if they've been working on things in the background, we've seen how quickly these things can come together, and a lot of business can happen in the last week of the window, can't it, with all the moving parts?
Well, yeah, and I think then it comes back to Liverpool having to play a bit of catch up, but we know that because they've had to change the recruitment team, the manager, a lot of other things, and they've had to have time for the manager to have a look at the players that he's got. And I know a lot of people go, "Oh, he should already know from watching them on video, this, that, and the other." But you get a very different way of thinking when you actually work with them all the time, especially when you know exactly what you want from these players. And only Arne Slot knows that. So he'll have looked at them. He's had, 3 weeks with the ones who come back last. So, there's not been that much time. But having said that, quite well where Liverpool needs strengthening, and that hasn't changed from the first day after the end of last season, because everybody knew. And of course, they're the three positions that Liverpool have already tried to sign somebody. They had a look at Lenny Yoro. We know about the centre back, and obviously they almost agreed a deal, they did agree a deal to sell Joe Gomez to Newcastle. Part of that was a wide forward, Anthony Gordon, coming the other way, which would have ticked another box. Then we got Martin Zubamendi, who was the other one, who was a defensive midfielder. So we've been saying all summer they were the three positions they were looking at, and they're the three that they nearly signed somebody. Now, they didn't sign anyone though, did they? So that's the thing that everyone's more concerned about. But we know that they are the positions that they're looking at. So going back to your initial question, it doesn't take very long for something to happen. Liverpool will be looking at stuff, and if they think they can get something done that can certainly help the midfield, because that looks the priority. And after that, if something happens with him where he goes, then they need to have another centre-back lined up. So you'd think if something does happen, it'd be those two things. The only thing outside of that is if somebody like Kelleher goes, right, I fancy leaving, which to be fair, hasn't looked likely, partly because there's nowhere for him to go, as it were, at the moment. There's another number of goalkeepers. You look at Aaron Ramsdale and Sam Johnston, both England internationals, who, as far as I'm aware, aren't really going anywhere yet, are they? They're still looking for moves. So there's that. So they might have to bring so they would have to bring a goalkeeper in, and that looks unlikely. I saw some rumour about Kostas Tsimikas today, but they'll only look to bring a left back in if somebody leaves. So those three positions are the ones they're looking at, and of them, it's the two would seem to be defensive midfielder, centre back, and the centre back is only if something happens with Gomez. So stuff can happen. I'd expect more youngsters to leave. Wouldn't be surprised if, don't know what Ghosty thinks. Look at Tyler Morton, he could go. And they could get another 20 million for him or something. But then if Tyler Morton doesn't go, he will get minutes for the first team. He'll be playing because there'll be League Cup games, there'll be league games where he'll be on the bench. He might even come in for some games because people will get injured. They can't just get rid of absolutely everybody, because we saw that last season when they get injuries. That's why the likes of Bobby Clark ended up playing so often. He's in the matchday squad, I think something like 24 times. So the openings will be there for some of the players for all of the players who remain, but how many are going to still be there? And then that's not on top of in case they bring anybody else in, which I'll ask you this question then. Do you expect them to bring anybody in? Don't mean selling. I mean, just now, do you expect them to bring anyone in?
You're asking me or just...
Yeah, both of you.
No, I actually don't at this stage. I think that we tell him what happens with Gomez on Sunday, whether he's in the squad or not, but I actually think he might stay now. And it will just be as it is, and the Liverpool will go into the season with the squad that they've got. Like I say, it's a good squad, but it can be improved. And Jarell Kwanzaa hasn't trained today, and Slot did confirm in the press conference that there is a minor injury issue there. So already you're looking at the potential folly of not bolstering your defence, because we know injuries are going to happen. They can give it the big end about being injury prevention specialists till the cows come home, really, but I suppose everyone is an injury prevention specialist until injuries happen, and that does happen to Liverpool.
I mean, one player we haven't mentioned is Basetic as well. He could end up, if he goes out on loan, I don't think they're going to sell him, but if he goes out on loan, suddenly you go, well, you're right back where you started last year with the defensive midfield options of just having Endo's the main one. And I know Gravenberch has played there, and I know they've kind of veered a bit more towards the two of them playing in the deeper role, but it still only leaves Endo, and that's a player who Slot clearly doesn't 100% fancy in the way that he wants the game to be played, in the way he wants to take Liverpool forward. So, maybe if Liverpool do get another defensive midfielder in, it could be on the back of Endo leaving. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your original question, do I expect business? Probably not at this stage. I think it would have been done by now if they were going to get any business done. And whilst I do go back to the point I made earlier that deals can happen quickly, I think I don't know what's happened behind the scenes, but it looks like the type of summer where just things haven't fallen for Liverpool in the transfer market. Obviously, they wanted Zubimendi, that didn't come together. But I agree with Ghosty. I look at the squad. If someone said to me now that whole squad will stay fit the whole season, do you need any more signings? I'd probably say no, they don't. But we know, and my biggest frustration with Liverpool is that recent evidence in recent seasons shows that it's quite an injury-prone squad. I find it bizarre that Liverpool don't seem to recognise that themselves and try and sign players who are less injury-prone and try and bolster in areas where they are weak. But for example, Diogo Jota. I'd be stunned if Diogo Jota doesn't miss a third of the season, because he the last 3 years he's missed around a third of the season each time. Kanate is another one that's along those lines. So for me, I know that Arne Slot had a good record with injuries in his previous clubs. It was a piece that Beth wrote this week that was quite good, but I just think that this Liverpool squad is injury prone, and it's not a nice thing to say about players, but unless Arne Slot can kind of keep them fit, or maybe his style won't be quite as intensive as Klopp's, so some of them will stay injury free. But I just don't think that will happen.
I think they'll sign somebody. I don't know who, but I have this kind of feeling that they will sign somebody.
Apart from the Marmish Davili.
No, I don't think anyone can. He doesn't care. What about somebody for this season? So yeah,
there's a story that's just come out there about Liverpool chasing Kvaratskhelia from Napoli, which I think would be a sensational move, wouldn't it? I think that.
Where's that?
It's Football Insider. Peter O'Rourke has just put it out. For an area where they've already looked at Anthony Gordon and they feel that they're well stocked in that area. Be absolutely astonished if that came off. But I just think Liverpool is sort of at the position now where they will just stick rather than twist. And I guess we'll find out whether that's the right decision in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, I mean, if they could get him from Napoli, I think that a lot of people are asking what the transfer shock is in the title of the podcast. In my mind, it was the fact that they still haven't made any deals with a week to go of the window. But it would be him if they somehow pulled that off. But yeah, I just think recent evidence shows that that we know Michael Edwards, we know that the way he works, and Richard Hughes is obviously working very closely with him, and that they're the types of people who hold their nerve. They're not going to go out and do anything silly that they don't believe in. So I kind of feel like that they've targeted people this window in Gordon, in Zubimendi that they've wanted. They've not got them over the line. And I can't imagine them going back to the list and saying, well, he's not quite as good, but we'll have a go. It just isn't the way they work. So, yeah. What would you say then is a dream end to this window in this next 7 days?
The dream for me is when it shuts, because any self-respecting, everyday football journalist hates the transfer window. So I'm quite looking forward to it being over and we can just crack on with the games. And weirdly, not weirdly, Klopp hated the transfer window, didn't he? And I think most managers don't like it. Apart from Chelsea, they just love buying players. And if it wasn't for the transfer window, why would Chelsea exist? That's what I say.
What's yours, Ghosty? What's your dream end to the window?
I mean, I always like signing attacking players who get you on the edge of your seat, even if you've got a million of them. I want 1,000,001. I used to play with 4 number 10s on Footy Manager, so bring as many of them in as you like. Kvaratskhelia links, I'm all for. But I suppose realistically, that number 6 position would have been ideal, wouldn't it? Zubimendi was the one who they obviously wanted, and it doesn't look like he's going to be coming in. Ironically, probably the best player on the pitch for that role is the one who's just left in Thiago Alcantara. Obviously, talked to Lukau's come on with me about his injury issues, and that would have been a problem, no doubt. But yeah, a number 6 of some sort. But Liverpool have been searching for one of those for 3 years, and still yet to find the one who they want.
I think in terms of an actual answer from me, yeah, I agree. But I think not so much a dream, but based in reality, because I don't really do dreams. Say they get in a number 6, I think it will probably come with Endo going out. That's just my hunch on it. Because I think if they feel as though they've got enough players now, even though they've tried to sign Zubimendi, which suggests that they don't feel as though they've got enough players now, is that it will probably be with somebody going. But going back to what I was saying before, I'd be amazed if they don't sign anybody and let Morton go and let Bajcetic go out on loan, and because then you've lost a lot of backup options in an area where, as Joe you mentioned earlier, Szoboszlai got injured for a bit last season. Curtis Jones is in and out. You can't put everything on McAllister because he gets tired. Gravenberch is unproven, so there's quite a lot of variables there. So the more options you've got in midfield, the better. And I just think that's probably where they've got to be a bit careful. That's the one place where, along with centre back, but we've dealt with that already, is an area where they can't leave themselves short, because it will be difficult to resolve that in the time they got left.
So, in terms of outgoings, they've struck what 65 million pounds worth of deals in the last sort of 2 weeks. Fabio Cavallo, Sepp van den Berg leaving last night. Bobby Clark yesterday morning was confirmed. What have you both made of them, Ghosty? What have you made of Hughes' outgoing? It seems to be Hughes' outgoing deals. It seems to be follow very much in the footsteps of Michael Edwards, getting good value for those types of players. Albeit, like Ian's just said, it does feel like a risk, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's really good business in terms of looking at those deals in isolation. Fabio Carvalho weren't going to play much in the number 10 role that he craved. Probably even less opportunity or fewer opportunities on the left. So that's a great move for him and for the club and for Brentford. They were getting a sort of Premier League level player around that level, shall we say, for his best years ahead. Sepp van den Berg ditto, really. I can see why Liverpool have been determined to not accept less than 20 million for him, given some of the other deals that have happened around the Premier League. So it's an incredible deal for Liverpool when you think they only cost was it 1.5 million from PSG's role 5 years ago when he's played 4 times for the senior team. And Bobby Clark, I know you were particularly high on him, weren't you? And Liverpool got 10 million for him, but again, he probably wasn't going to feature much, certainly now that the Champions League back rather than the Europa League. So it's, all clauses in, it's upwards of 60 million Liverpool have earned there from 3 players who weren't going to play much at all. And then, obviously, the Dom Solanke deal going to Tottenham from Bournemouth has earned them around about 8 to 9 million. So, outgoings-wise, Liverpool have been very prudent, and they have to be really, given the model that the club is run with by, obviously mandated by the owners. So that all looks great in isolation. The wider context of it is, though, what use is that to Liverpool this summer? 60 million sitting in the bank if it's not being used on strengthening the squad. So I can totally get people who were sort of shrugging and saying, well, it's all well and good, but what, losing players is no real help if the money's not being spent.
I mean, they've saved an awful lot of money on wages. That's was it massive. Thiago, I know Adrian wasn't on loads, but the other two you'd think were on a fur whack. And it was only it wasn't that long ago we were talking about how you're thinking they made a load of money on Gruitch, they made Brewster, players like that, Kajana, Hoover, and not however, as I would always write it. They made a load of money off them, and you're thinking, where's the next one's going to come? And I think because you haven't seen them, Vandenberg, for example, I think because we haven't seen him play, we think, oh, well, that's quite a lot of money. But it may end up being a decent deal for everybody if he's been playing top level for the last couple of years certainly last year in Germany, I should say. And quite a lot of teams wanted him. And Liverpool got a lot of money for him. Going back to Bobby Clark, I think that's a different one because I don't think Carvalho and Vandenberg probably had a future at Liverpool anyway. I think just judging from the impact that they haven't made since they came in. Bobby Clark's different because he did. But I think partly he kind of was behind that move as well because he wanted to be playing. And, he knows Pep Lijnders at Salzburg and he obviously wanted him. And, they won 2-0, didn't they, against Dynamo Kiev this week. So they're going to be probably in the Champions League. I think it was interesting that deal got confirmed after the results of that first leg where they went, yeah, okay, we're probably going to go through. So let's sign him. We got the money for it. So, no, I think that's a different one because I think he's somebody who could have been a big success at Liverpool, but it's me. Who cares what I think? In the sense of, it's what Arne Slot and his coaching staff think and the recruitment team, and they probably looked at him and gone, you know what? He's not going to be getting minutes. He won't be playing, and he's somebody that he's not going to develop here in the way that he wants to, in the way that we'd want him to over the next couple of years. So best thing is letting him go, but we'll put in, as Ghosty said, these clauses in the contract, which mean that if he ends up being a bit of a success, we'll have first a refusal on him to try and bring him back. And that's a very kind of European-y thing, isn't it? There haven't been many teams, although I think it was Aston Villa done it this year, haven't they? We've mentioned this with the Hull City player, I can't remember his name. They brought him back after selling him for a year. So
Jaden Philogene, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it shows that it can be done and it does work if you want it. And is it like a new version of a loan? I don't know, but again, it's early days for that kind of thing. But he clearly thought Bobby Clark isn't going to be playing that much this season, and Bobby Clark thought I'd like to be playing because I've had the big taste of playing in the first team. Played in a League Cup final, didn't he? So, I can see why, but in terms of talent, I'd have kept him around.
Like you say, I was quite shocked by the Bobby Clark deal, but looking at the details, it does make a lot of sense. I think, like you say, that he probably wanted that move, wanted to join up with Pep Lijnders again, who obviously liked him a lot. And then when you see that they've got first refusal and sell-on clauses, that sort of thing, I think it makes sense. And I think I said in the pod last week that sales are the new loans, and I think for Liverpool, it's about getting the money in, and they can go back for him if he does live up to his potential.
Especially for Clark at a club like Salzburg, who were famously one of the kind of feeder clubs now in Europe, aren't they? Particularly to Leipzig. That path has been well worn over the last few years, with them obviously both being part of the Red Bull stable. So if he goes to Leipzig in 2 years for double what Salzburg have just paid for him, and Liverpool have got the best part of 20% of that, all just continues to help towards sustaining the club, I guess, doesn't it? Sustaining Liverpool, I mean.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of people watching, by the way. So if you're watching on YouTube and you want to drop a question in the chat, go for it, and I'll put it to the guys as we carry on with the pod. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, press the bell. Thank you very much for listening. It's much appreciated. Going back to transfers, then let's have a little talk about Joe Gomez's future. I know we mentioned him briefly before, but yeah, I mean, obviously left out the squad last week, Ian. How, if Liverpool can get around they agreed a 45 million deal with Newcastle. If they could get that sort of money for him, it would be really good money, wouldn't it, for Joe Gomez? But he's one of those sort of players that you can see why they'd want to sell him, but he's so versatile, he's so experienced, he's played so many games that selling him would be a big risk, and they would have to replace him, surely, wouldn't they?
Well, a couple of things here. If Quanta's not trained and he's not going to be fit for Sunday, then Gomez is at the very least going to be on the bench. So there's that, which kind of underlines that, look at that, one injury in and now he's back involved. So that hasn't taken that much. Liverpool can't sell any of those centre-backs. Not that I'm saying they're going to sell Van Dijk or Karate or Quanta, unless they bring in another one, because they've got rid of Vandenberg. And some of the others have, I know we haven't played for a long time. Reece Williams has gone, Billy Koumetio's gone, Nat Phillips is going to go. So all these kind of absolute fallback options are going to have gone. So they're going to need another centre back. So they're not going to let Gomez go unless they have somebody in. And then it comes back to what we were saying before. There's 7 days to go. Unless they've got somebody lined up. They had a look at Euro. They're not paying that much money for someone who's going to be fourth choice for a year or two. And they decided against that. So, yeah, I think with Gomez, he's been here before, though, hasn't he? He didn't get in the League Cup final squad in 2022, and then he played something like 2 league games, 2 or 3 for the remainder of that season, when they were going for all 4 trophies. And so if he couldn't get a look in then, it's like, well, when's he ever going to do that? So everyone thought he was going to leave. He's had a new contract. And the next 2 seasons, he's played something like between them about 80-odd games. And last year, he featured in about 51, 52, which is more than he'd ever done in any of his seasons as a professional footballer. So, and he ends up going to the Euros. So he didn't play, but he was still there. The year before, he'd have been nowhere near it. So, yeah, it just shows that how quickly things can change. But again, he benefited from others' positions. He played defensive midfield for a couple of games, played a lot of games at left back. Started, I think, 2 or 4 games at centre back where he'd like to play. But again, Matip's gone. I think people forget that as well. So that person for the first half of that season he played was Matip. He doesn't play for Liverpool anymore. So there are a lot of players who've gone. So Gomez, money, probably won't get 45. I think that was part of the deal with Gordon. I think they were, I think Newcastle needed to do this, that, and the other until the point where they didn't, which is why this deal didn't go through. So could Liverpool get 45? Maybe. You look at, well, we know what the rate is now. Vandenberg is 25, well, something like around them lines. So Gomez is going to go for significantly more than that. Whether it's 45, I don't know. But from his point of view, it might just be on him, and only he knows what he's thinking. He might go, well, you know what? If I'm not going to be playing very often in the position that I'd like to play, it was all very well doing that last year because I had a manager who knows me better than anyone because I'm the only player who's been there the entire time that he was there. It might be time for a change, but again, Liverpool cannot sanction a deal unless they have another centre-back lined up. Simple as that.
If I was Liverpool, I'd be straight back onto Newcastle. I mean, I don't know what's happened there, but Newcastle still haven't been able to sign Gay, have they? They haven't got that deal over the line. They've made a number of bids, but Liverpool, I'd be singing the praises of Gomez and saying to Newcastle, he can play centre half for you. He's experienced. He can play both fullback positions. And try and get that Gordon deal resurrected. Couple of questions before we continue. Jep Fons asks, why are Liverpool looking at left wingers? We have plenty. What do you reckon, Gorsty? Is it just a long-term planning thing there?
Yeah, I mean, it depends how sort of seriously they are looking. I think Gordon was one who got sort of presented to them in late June when Newcastle were desperately, frantically trying to, ease the PSR issues, and Liverpool felt they were well stocked, but obviously quite liked the player, so had talks over that. But then elsewhere, I'm not really sure that they are looking too firm. I mean, this Kvaratskhelia link this morning is interesting. How much truth is in there, we yet to really find out. But I don't think Liverpool are looking too firmly at that area. We know that they tend to target players as opposed to areas, so I wouldn't suggest that they feel that is the place that they need to improve on when they've got Obviously, Luis Diaz still there. Cody Gakpo can play there. Probably his best position there, actually. Diogo Jota has played there as well, and of course, Darwin Núñez. So I don't think that is an area they are specifically looking towards. We know that they've looked at Zubimendi, who is a number 6, and as a result of coming to that conclusion that he's the one for them, that means that naturally they have looked at other number 6s. So that is probably the area. But I agree with Doyley on the Joe Gomez front. I think you absolutely cannot sanction a sale without having a replacement, and also a replacement who can probably do more than just be a centre-back, because Joe Gomez played most of the season at left-back last season, played at right-back when Trent wasn't there and Conor Bradley weren't there. So you need someone equally versatile, I suggest, and probably you're not going to get anyone who's better at doing that than Joe Gomez, certainly to the level he plays at in each of those positions.
Ian, Nigel Smith asked Gravenberch starting in the 6 against Ipswich. Do you think he'll stay there long term or be replaced by Endo, Jones or McAllister?
Who knows? If he does really well, then he'll stay there. But it's so early days. I mean, the sample size isn't very much to form a judgment, is it? So I don't even think he plays as a 6, as it were. I think he's just one of the two of them back there. I know Slot's quite keen not to pin himself down on formations, but that's one difference that, we're all in agreement. I'm pretty sure that they do play a different setup in midfield, and they have the two of them a bit more regularly dropping deeper so they can keep the ball. That's because that's what he wants. So I think that kind of helps. But yeah, I'd be very much interested to see how Gravenberch does against Manchester United at Old Trafford next weekend. That's the actual test. If he ends up starting there, we'll see how he goes, and we'll see what actually how he's going to cope in that position.
Absolutely. And John Kay asked, do you guys think that the squad size will limit the focus on domestic cups if the boys can stay close to the top of the league? I think so, because if you look back at managers' first seasons, I remember Klopp certainly as the domestic cups were. I know in this first half season they got to the League Cup final, but in his first full season, the domestic cups were competitions that it almost felt like he sacrificed a little bit, didn't he? So, what do you think on that, Ghosty?
Yeah, I think Jamie Carragher said it, didn't he, on this pod a couple of weeks back, that you shouldn't really be looking to go full throttle at both competitions, and some traditionalists might sneer at that, but there's certainly wisdom in the thinking. Sometimes, the FA Cup doesn't start till January, but if you're doing well around that time, then you sort of tiptoe around the FA Cup and hope that you get a couple of home draws or a couple of lower league opposition. So yeah, if Liverpool are doing well in the league, then I wouldn't be too distraught if the FA Cup was thrown in, and we'll see what happens with the League Cup. They could go out, third or fourth round, couldn't they? But I think last season was the best day of the season, wasn't it? The Carabao Cup final. But it's a long old slog to get there, and depends how they're getting on league-wise, I guess, because the squad is good, but is not huge, is it?
No, it's not. Before we move on to the Brentford game, just wanted to touch on Giorgio Marmash-Davili. I hope I've pronounced his name properly, but it looks like that's a deal that's progressing, Doyley, and it seems like Liverpool have got a lot of stick for their transfer business so far this summer, and understandably so. But that looks like a deal that could be a really clever one. Some years down the line, doesn't it? He was very highly rated last year at Valencia. Has done well in the Euros. He looks like somebody who could solve a long-term goalkeeper issue for Liverpool when maybe Alisson finally does depart the club.
Yeah, it's one way they've clearly looked at it and gone, right, he's 23. As you say, all those things about his career so far. Let's just get a head start and see what we do with him. Maybe if the deal gets concluded, I should say, he would still be at Valencia this season at least. Could even be the following season. I don't know, but it's not for now. And I know some fans will go, "Oh, what's the point in that?" But a year, 2 years down the line, if it goes through, and then Liverpool need a goalkeeper, and they've got this guy, then they'd be like, "Oh well, just as well we did that." So, I think in the context of how things are going in this transfer window, it seems a little bit strange that they're prioritising something from years down the line. But overall, in isolation, it's a decent deal, because if he ends up building on the the potential that he's shown so far, then the money that if it goes through, that they pay for him isn't that much. When you consider how much they pay for Alisson.
Absolutely. We've got one more question that I just want to address from Tim H, who says, Joe, do you want me to come round and screw that vent cover back on for you? And I noticed at the start of the pod, it doesn't. I promise you the rest of the house isn't all falling down. But yeah, probably Tim, if you want to drop me a DM and we can sort that out. I'm not the best at DIY. Liverpool play Brentford at the weekend. They might come up against two of their former players almost immediately. Thomas Frank's side, certainly away from home, has caused them problems in the past, Gorsty. And they start the season with a win. It should be an interesting test, shouldn't it? It's a lot of people admire Brentford, and rightly so. I think Arne Slot will be expected to win his first game, but it'll be a big test for him, won't it?
Yeah, it could have been easier, really, couldn't it? Brentford are always one of those sorts of teams who always really give Liverpool a good go. And obviously they're not going to have Ivan Toney because it looks like he's on the move. But they could have Carvalho in the ranks, Sepp Vandenberg as well, of course. And yeah, I like Brentford, sort of upwardly mobile, ambitious, do things really well in terms of their recruitment. They look at the data exhaustively, sort of Liverpool style, and make sure that everything they do is sort of strategic and planned out. So yeah, I like them as a Premier League club. Not the most difficult, but it could have probably been easier for Slot in his first Premier League game. But I think the fans will be right behind them, and ultimately, I think you will see Liverpool be too strong for them.
Let's pick our team.
I was going to say, I think with Brentford, I think they're going to be totally different to Ipswich. Ipswich like to keep the ball. I think Brentford, to a certain degree, like to just not play it long, but they like to be a bit more direct, and they certainly did. They've got the players to do that. I didn't see the game against, was it Crystal Palace? They beat Palace 2-1, didn't they? So I didn't see that. So I'm not sure whether that's changed in any way their approach this season. Obviously, with Carvalho playing, that suggests that they still like the players with a bit of a little bit of flair. But no, it as Gorsty said, it could have been easier, but it also could have been more difficult. And I think Brentford away from home has always been difficult for Liverpool. I know they won 4-1 last season, but even then there were at times where it got a little bit tricky at the start. But when they've been to Anfield, I've actually been quite disappointed in them. I think they've looked a bit poor, but I think that's partly to do with when the game is played. It tends to be in the second half of the season. I think it'll be a bit different this time around because I think they'll have something to prove.
Yeah, I watched the Palace game and thought Brentford looked quite good. Palace actually dominated possession a lot, but on the break, Brentford looked really good. And I quite like Mbeumo, who scored the opening goal, and I think he'd be a great backup for Salah on the right wing. And there was some Liverpool were linked with him, weren't they, earlier this summer?
Just thinking, early in the window, yeah.
He strikes me as a very Liverpool type signing. But yeah, he played well, and I think they've got really good players on the break, Brentford, and can cause Liverpool different types of problems. So I think it's quite a tricky game Sunday. It's not going to be as easy as I think some people look at home games like that and think that Liverpool will pass that test quite easily. But as you've both said, I think they're three very different. The opening three games are three very different tests for Arne Slot, and this one is a fairly tricky opening home match. There's quite a few comments that I want to just quickly address before we pick our team. Actually, a lot of people, a lot of anger with Liverpool's window. A lot of people angry with Hughes and the owners. But I probably get some stick for this, and I don't know whether you two will agree. But I don't necessarily look at this and think this is like an FSG thing. This window, I think I look at it and think, well, a lot of people wanted Michael Edwards back at Liverpool, and Michael Edwards has a certain way of operating in the transfer market, and that's a very careful, considered. You only have to read some of the different interviews with Ian Graham the other day, who was Liverpool's head of research under Michael Edwards, to see the type of recruitment that Liverpool wanted to do with that department. Didn't you, Gorsty? Do you think this is just an owner's thing, or do you think that this is more the way Liverpool are trying to approach transfers again with Edwards back at the helm?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it's an own thing because, some people have scoffed at it, but they were convinced last summer to present what would have been a British record deal for Caicedo, weren't they, in mid-August? So they will sort of sanction the money if they are convinced. I think it just comes back to the sort of uber cautious nature of the way the club operates, really, and maybe Michael Edwards is central to that, where they don't like to waste money, and they're sort of polar opposites to Chelsea, aren't they? And Chelsea get ridiculed almost daily and almost hourly, rather, at the moment, given the craziness that goes on with them. And I'm not suggesting Liverpool should be the same way as Chelsea, but the two total ends of the scale, aren't they? And I think Liverpool sometimes are too cautious, too wary of a transfer misstep. And that, as Ian Graham has pointed out on his sort of press run recently to promote his book, I think he calculates that there's a 51% chance of failure. It's either failure or success, not much either, obviously, in terms of getting your transfers right. So, why isn't there more of a concerted effort to improve the squad? If you see what I mean, like why is there only seemingly a handful of players in world football who can improve Liverpool's squad? I don't really buy that. But that debate will rage on, I guess. And they've got a week to give Slot a stronger squad than the summer he started with, because at the moment it's probably weaker, isn't it, having lost a handful of first-team players, albeit injured types in Matip and Thiago, but also fringe players as well who've moved on.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of people seem to be annoyed, and people saying, "Oh, so the fans are wrong." I don't think anyone's saying the fans are wrong. I agree with you, Ghosty. I think they should take more risks, and I think I understand the calculations around why they don't want to waste money on players in the transfer market. Ian Graham was talking about they didn't want to buy squad players, but I just think that the transfer market is just not an exact science, and I don't want them to take anywhere near as many risks as some clubs, and Man United take too many risks and fail too many times. I think Chelsea are terrible, and I would never want Liverpool to be anywhere near like Chelsea, but I certainly think I'd like them to take more risks in the transfer market. Who do you put it down to, Doyley, before we move on and pick our team?
I think people forget that there's actually been a massive signing at Liverpool this season. That's the manager, and I think while fans like players and this, that, and the other, and that's fair enough. The bigger change is that they've got a new manager, so that's the one thing that overrides everything, I reckon. And also they got new sporting director and a new FSG have got a new chief executive football in Michael Edwards. So while we'd want more players, and they would have signed at least one, obviously, had things gone properly. I do think that there is a massive change, and that's come on the training pitch.
I just to chime in on that, I like this idea of we're only signing players who are capable of improving the first team. I'm all for that. I'd probably prefer that over signing 3 or 4 squad players who aren't really going to set the pulses racing and are just going to come in and do a job. Absolutely on board with signing players who are going to improve Liverpool's first 11 immediately. But it's all well and good saying that, but you've got to do it as well, I guess. You can't just say it and then not do it, if that makes sense. And I get that there's a limited pool of players that you can choose from who can do that, but this isn't a Liverpool of 2020 when they were the best team in the world. They're a team who were good with room to improve.
And surely it works both ways. Sometimes you sign a player convinced. I'm sure Naby Keita is a good example of a player they will have signed, spent a lot of money on, put a deal in place a year in advance, and were convinced he would improve Liverpool's first team. He didn't really do that in his time at Liverpool. But he played a part. And whatever you think of Keita, he probably improved the squad. He just didn't really improve the first team. And Liverpool often chose different types of players. But that's why I find it a bit odd that they go, well, we can't sign players unless they improve the team. Well, sometimes you've got to gamble, and sometimes they won't. But they might play a part in the squad. Divock Origi was a player that I'm sure they signed with potential to be an ever-present for Liverpool. He never was that, but he certainly played a huge role in the trophies that they won. And I don't know. I think you can be too careful. I think Liverpool are too careful, and you can see, you can just see in the comments now the frustrations, I can understand the frustrations. But I go back to my original. I don't necessarily think it's an owner thing. Maybe it's their style in terms of the types of people they recruit. But I think it's the way Liverpool sign players. They just don't go and spend loads and loads of money on everyone. I think they want every player to work. But I think when they do want someone, the owners put the money up because they were going to sign Zubimendi. That wasn't an issue. It was him that made that decision. But they were going to pay off his release clause, which would have cost Liverpool a lot of money in one go, wouldn't it? They wouldn't have been able to pay that over several years. They would have had to commit those funds up front. So it's not like Chelsea where they're committing a lot of money but signing big long contracts where they don't pay as much up front. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting. Thanks so much for all the comments. Let's pick our team for the game at the weekend. Doyley, we'll start with you. Alisson in goal, but what's your back four?
Same. To be honest, the entire team is the same. just cut to that.
Well, thanks, Doyley. That's very nice. Well, all right, okay. Let's have a talk about a couple of positions then. I don't think the entire team's the same because I think Konate would come in for me.
Actually, I forgot. To be fair, to be fair, I was on about the team that started the second half. Yeah, Konate will play.
But looking into midfield again, would you both be looking at Gravenberch to try and build on that performance?
Yeah, I think so. It seems like they're really trying to see what he can do in that position, aren't they? And there was a lot of talk when he joined last year that they were going to try and mould him into a number 6 because they saw a few of his skills that were suited towards that. And then the season starts and the best laid of plans just fall by the wayside. They never really had a chance to do that. But I think now they're looking to try and do that, aren't they, under Slot? So, yeah, I see no reason to give that a change at the moment.
Someone said, is that Paul Gorst or WB Yates? Who, I won't lie, maybe I'm not very cultured. I had to look that up. And I looked it up and it does look a lot like... It does look like...
WB Yates?
Yeah, WB Yates.
I'm going to have to Google him.
Rory asked, what's the view on Darwin Núñez? Obviously didn't come off the bench last week, Doyley. But I think don't look it up now. Yeah.
He died in 1939. What a contemporary reference.
when Doyley was born.
James Pierce would remember that. Yeah.
What's the view on Darwin? Do you think? Obviously, he came back a little bit later than some of his colleagues, Doyley, but didn't come off the bench last week. But surely he's going to play a fairly major role this season. And I know that Liverpool were keen to bat away rumours that they would consider selling him this summer, weren't they?
Well, they played one game and he came back late, and he's somebody who needs momentum, so I wouldn't be too worried about it. I think it's whether or not he gets a bit frustrated himself, but because these first couple of weeks they're only playing one game a week, but then the minute they come back from the international break will be interesting in case he goes up to wherever and starts chunnering a little bit. Don't know whether it might just be some others that do that, but no problems with him. And when they come back, they'll be playing loads of games twice a week, and he'll get his minutes, and then we'll see what he can do.
Brilliant. Let's do a score prediction for the weekend. Ghosty, you go first.
Yeah, I'll go with the 2-1 Liverpool. I think Salah will continue his scoring run. He tends to do well against Brentford, doesn't he? I seem to remember a few goals against them over the years. So 2-1 Liverpool.
Totally.
I think exactly the same. It'll be a bit of a slog, but they'll just about get over the line.
I'm going to be pretty boring and say I think exactly the same as well. I think Brentford will give them a good test, but I expect Liverpool to get over the line. But I think there'll be one or two hairy moments for the defence. Ian, Paul, thank you very much. Thank you to all the comments. Loads of comments today. Loads of viewers. Please give us a like, subscribe, follow Blood Red. Thank you for predictions. Nigel Smith predicting 2-0. Follow Blood Red on all podcast platforms on YouTube. Press the bell. Give us some stars and come back on Monday when we'll be looking back on the Brentford game and talking about the final few days of a very strange transfer window for Liverpool this year. See you then. Ta-ra.